Real Estate Investing Fools. Today I'm doing a little focus on green building because this is such an important topic for investors. And my guest is Breana Wheeler, who is responsible for launching BREEM in the U.S. market. So you've probably heard of LEED and WELL certifications. You may not have heard of BREEM, which is BREEAM, but it's actually the most widely used program worldwide with over 2.3 million registered buildings and over 594,000 certifications. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So can you explain a little bit about what BREEM is and why it's important?
So BREEM is a sustainability assessment method for buildings. And what it does is it provides a holistic measurement of the sustainability value in assets.
So I know it's a third-party certification. So what does that look like?
So our model uses a licensed assessor. So what that assessor does is they ensure the validity of the BREEM rating. And their role is to independently assess the performance of the asset against the BREEM standard and determine that rating. And they then put together a report and they submit it for certification.
And is it for all types of buildings? Is it for large commercial projects?
Sure, any type of building can use it. So it can be large or small and really at any performance level. Our program is really about recognizing sustainability value in assets as it exists and being used as a framework for driving improvements forward towards kind of the ultimate goal of the most sustainable building.
So what kind of things does it look at a like overall broad scale?
So we start with environmental performance. So we're looking at energy, we're looking at water and waste, and that's one key aspect. The second key aspect is health and well-being. It's always been an aspect of our program. We believe that people and occupants are a really important part of what it means to be sustainable. So health and well-being is a key aspect. And the third piece is really around maximizing the value of the asset and protecting that value in the long term. So included, we address resilience and other management practices that help protect that value over that longer term.
And so this started overseas and is now in the U.S. Is there a difference between how the U.S. looks at these types of things versus the rest of the world?
I think it's been a matter of framework, right? So so it's probably worth talking a little bit about our organization and where we come from. So BRE, our organization, is a 100-year-old building science research organization. And when sustainability became a topic in the late 1980s, our organization, kind of looked around and said, well, there's no real definition for what sustainability means for buildings. So we want to put something together so that the market has something that it can understand how this translates. And that's where BREEM came from. It was the very first in the world, launching in 1990. So our view very much came from a building science perspective. How do we understand these concepts through that? And so our framework has always been about looking at a holistic sort of view. In lots of places, the conversation really, and here in the US in particular, the conversation started with green, which is very much about environmental performance, what we looked at. So energy is a crucial one, then water and say waste, for example. And so I guess it's just a difference in framing about how we want to look at these issues. And we've seen, this narrow focus in the US happening initially on green and now expanding into sustainability as a general overview.
I know that New York City, for example, has new regulations. Other markets are putting those into place. Is that something that you're tracking as well? And does BREEM play a role in that?
Absolutely. So we work with clients all over the world, and regulation is not something new in this space. And in some ways, it's been a recognition, I think, on the challenge that we're facing and the built environment's facing to address climate change. How are we going to move the needle forward? And we've seen, certainly over the last 4 years, many cities taking action. They have, carbon footprints that they want to address. They have commitments, and this seems to be, the way to address it. How do we get everybody to move forward? Because we need every building to take action. So we've absolutely been tracking that. We've been working with a number of clients on this. And many of them without assets in those particular jurisdictions that already have the programs, but really saying, this is just the starting point, right? You may not have assets in New York City, for example, but, this is building performance standards are coming to many other jurisdictions. So, we've been kind of watching this space. BREEM's role is really twofold. One is our program is focused on net zero carbon. So that's the ultimate outcome in our program. And so, and it's been that way since the beginning because we knew that net zero from the beginning was how we were going to have to address climate change. When we started 30 years ago, obviously it was that thing that was going to happen in the future. And the future is arriving, right? Climate change is happening. So, and we're now on a much narrower path. We have a clear timetable on action. Our work here is really just to say we all kind of need the same thing. Everybody needs to decarbonize. That's where we all need to go. So BREEM's solution has been about helping not only buildings understand where they are today, what's the delta between where they are and where they need to be for net zero, but looking at how they can push forward to drive towards that goal, with one eye on the regulation, yes, but thinking of how this impacts asset value as well. So our program focuses on efficiency first. So looking at the building envelope, looking at the building systems, driving efficiency as hard as possible, and then focusing on source energy. There's a lot of place to go with this. I mean, there's a lot of buildings where, they just aren't efficient yet. And we want to encourage buildings to think really hard about that, investing in their buildings before they start seeking other solutions, or indeed, in some cases, get caught up in regulation and end up seeing this or finding this to be a cost issue rather than an investment in their building.
Interesting. Can you define what net zero carbon is?
What a great question. What isn't net zero carbon? No, there's so many definitions, right? And there is, some consensus forming on what it is. In our world, it is simply buildings creating more energy than they use. And that's a difficult one. In our program, we focus on on-site renewables, not because we believe that every building will be able to achieve that balance, but because we are encouraging assets to focus on what they can do with what they have on site first. But yeah, this is a big area because the definitions can vary between programs and what counts, what doesn't, offsets, offsite. There's a lot of different definitions that go on there.
So for real estate investors, what is the sort of value of using a certification like this? Is it for resale? Is it for, overall bringing down your costs? What are the benefits here?
So it's twofold. Absolutely focusing on measuring performance helps drive improvement. It's very rare that any asset will take a look at their performance and not find things that they could improve, right? So we've seen that definitely drives it. But I think what we're seeing now with the changes, particularly in the last year, 18 months, is the drive really coming from investors looking for understanding around performance. And third-party assurance is a big part of that. Third-party assurance is already a widely accepted concept. Think about how we treat financial data. What investor would trust a company that says, yeah, my accounting is within industry practice, but a third party hasn't reviewed it, right? Just trust me. So we already understand that concept, that there's a difference between self-verification and third-party verification. But it's not just the process. What is measured also matters. And BREEM provides that really rigorous definition of sustainability, value, and assets based in science. And there's been a lot there too. We're definitely looking at, how many organizations are now, committing to science-based targets. There's a reason for that, because the science is driving what are we supposed to, what matters. Science helps us define what matters and actually deliver on those outcomes.
In terms of certifications, it seems like there's a few leaders in the space, but there's also a lot of companies now coming up with different types of certifications. Why does it matter which certification a developer uses if they're starting a new building?
It's a great question. I mean, there are definitely different things that are being measured. That's a big part of it. But there's a couple of key things that I would say, every developer should ask the questions when they're considering which certification to use. So the first one is, does going through this process help me deliver a better performing building while protecting and growing asset value for the future, right? So this isn't just about environmental performance, but this is about delivering healthy environments. This is about delivering asset value in the longer term. And thinking about what's the basis for, how I'm measuring what that is. So our industry widely accepts the science-based standards for reducing GHG emissions, The same standard is important for building performance certifications. The second thing I would say is to ask is, if my asset got a perfect score using this system, would it by any reasonable measure be considered the most sustainable universally? So what does best in class look like in a certification? And we're seeing it really clearly that the priorities right now among investors and owners is net zero carbon and resilience. So if a certification isn't measuring those things as part of its definition, then the answer would be no, right? So thinking about what does that mean? What are we defining? What are we including? How holistic is the approach? The third thing is, does this process contribute to my organization's risk management processes and investor confidence? So really, for developers, this is about being able to sell the asset at the end for a profit, right? Investors are looking really hard at the life cycle costs of buildings now, because particularly with regulation coming in, looking at the longer term to say, I'm buying an asset that's great now, but in 10 years time, am I going to have an extensive, retrofit cost because it's not going to meet regulation, or other kind of aspects looking down the longer term? So it really is about thinking about how does this contribute to the overall risk management process for ensuring that value later on. And then finally, how rigorous is the certification process? So rigor is really important. So submitting documentation for review, for example, provides one level of rigor, but it really does depend on the evidence that's allowed. Having on-site verification provides an additional confidence, that what is written down is the full picture, and especially if that verification is conducted by an independent third party. But it's really critical, I think, that all of these aspects are used to drive value overall, right? Sustainability and certification shouldn't be a parallel process to our normal business, right? It should be part of our risk management and our approach to business generally at the core of what we do.
Fantastic. So with BREEM, an assessor comes and actually looks and sort of verifies. Is that part of the process?
Yeah, that's correct. So on-site verification is a core part of our program. So evidence is absolutely important, documentation, but the documentation has to meet our standard. But the assessor goes on site to verify that that's accurate, and that's really important. It definitely gives a better view as to how buildings operate and work. We talk with many owners, right? And almost everybody will say, I have this building that's a little weird. It's a little bit strange, particularly existing buildings, right? There's no end to the weird and wonky existing buildings. And that doesn't always come through on paper, right? So our assessors are building professionals who understand how buildings operate and are built. And they essentially can go out and evaluate the building using the BREEAM standard and understand it in a fundamental way. It saves a lot of time, I have to say. Trying to put down these things on paper doesn't always help. And the assessor can really contribute to the understanding that comes from it. They're independent, they're simply doing verification work. They're not a consultant, but it helps to have a human being in person to help explain, the nuances. And, we find a lot of times that, the chief engineers especially appreciate that touch, because having somebody who understands buildings is a really key aspect to it.
Well, you just mentioned something interesting, which is wonky buildings. Certainly old historic buildings have all sorts of issues. So I know BREEAM has a program called the In-Use program for retrofitting. And can you talk a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, sure. So it's two separate programs. So the In-Use program is for existing buildings in operation. And then we have a refurbishment and fit out program that focuses on renovation. So we call it RFO for short, just to save my time here. So RFO is a program that's focused on the design and construction program for everything from major renovations through to tenant improvement projects. So it's really scalable in a lot of different ways. The criteria and the requirements flex to fit the scope of the project so that it fits the project rather than asking the project to fit the standard. And essentially, it's about looking at how to how to move through, how to improve a building when we're talking about renovations in particular, how to, again, looking at it from a life cycle perspective, how to make that building better, how to drive that value forward, how to reduce operational carbon, and so on.
Excellent. So all of this costs money. Can you explain about Fannie Mae has a green financing program? I know BREEM is involved with that. Can you explain a little how that works?
So Fannie Mae offers preferential pricing on loans secured by a multifamily property with a Fannie Mae recognized green building certification. So all their recognized certifications have minimum energy or water or water reduction requirements. And Fannie Mae has sorted them into tiers, with those certifying net zero at the very top and then down from there. So what they do is the loans on these buildings are disclosed as a green mortgage-backed security, or MBS, which then underpins green bonds. This supports and incentivizes U.S. rental housing stock to become more energy and water efficient, which in theory should translate to more affordable homes for folks. So BREEAM's in Use program, our standard program doesn't have any prerequisites that would meet that. So we created the Residential Plus program specifically for multifamily asset seeking financial incentives like Fannie Mae's. It mirrors our standard residential program, but introduces that required energy prerequisite. As a result, the program only offers the top 3 BREEAM ratings, which is very good, excellent, and outstanding, which keeps the outcomes comparable for assets that are not pursuing this financial incentive. BREEAM is included in Group 1, which is one tier down from getting the towards zero, net zero performance. And our recognition has really been or acceptance has really been a recognition of BREEAM's rigor and credibility as a science-led standard and a robust certification process that we offer.
It's fantastic that it's available for multifamily. What do you think about the fact that there's all of these single-family rental portfolios being created right now? Is there any way to sort of make sure that they're more environmentally friendly?
Absolutely. So interestingly enough, our residential program actually covers everything from multifamily down to single family homes. This is actually a space that we worked in for a while. This is not a new concept in other markets that we work in, particularly in Europe, where single family homes are owned. And I think it's a really exciting space to be in. We speak to a lot of municipalities, and many of them are worried about the single family housing stock, how sustainable it is in an affordability sense. We refer to the term fuel poverty. What does it cost to operate a home? Well, when it's inefficient, in some places that can be a substantial part of a family's income. And if you're already struggling as it is just to pay rent, that just already causes additional financial strain. But, the other thing they worried about is resilience. And particularly in places where we've seen, reoccurring natural disasters, wind events, and so on. It's just not becoming economical to rebuild every time. So how do we do this? How do we make homes more resilient? We would see this as a great opportunity for an investment in our single family housing stock to bring it up to a standard which is both sustainable and affordable in that way, but also resilient, taking steps to really stop the cycle of families, finding that their homes are completely damaged and wrecked along with their lives, and not really having the ability to build back, and thinking about this in a longer term way. Many single family homeowners don't always have the means to invest in their properties in that way, but we're hoping this could actually help the process of raising the housing stock, being able to tap into the commercial loan market, to be able, C-PACE financing and so on, to be able to bring in some of that capital investment, while also being able then for municipalities to be able to focus on, the single family homeowners that need a little bit more help.
You just mentioned C-PACE financing. I recently talked to somebody about that. I feel like that's a program that's going to grow a lot more. Is that something that you're tracking?
Yeah, we've been watching it for a couple of years. It's interesting. The view is changing. I think there was a lot of reluctance on the part of many commercial owners to put any kind of lien on their properties, concerns about what does that mean for resale? What does that look like? Does it look like we haven't paid our bills? And I think there was a lot of concern about that. I think the problem in a way is that money is a little cheap right now. So, access to capital isn't always a problem, but I think we're going to see that grow over time. And it's great to see another avenue that's opening up to finance the retrofits that the existing stock is really going to need.
Fantastic. Last question for you. I know that Wash REIT recently announced that they're expanding their green bond program with BREEM. Are you seeing more interest from other REITs doing this sort of thing?
Absolutely. So two key things that are really driving that. One is the investor demand for transparency on performance. So, even for REITs that are not pursuing green bonds, measuring and certifying is becoming a core, measuring, certifying, and reporting is becoming a really core activity. It's no longer simply, a marketing tactic used by a niche set of asset owners to, up the rent rate and get better tenants in, right? Investors are asking many more detailed questions about performance and in many cases asking for evidence and detail, right? That they would never have asked for before. We've seen investors starting to ask for actual energy data, consumption data from buildings, which is fairly new in this. That's really upped the game. And for many REITs, they're looking at this as a scalability issue. They're looking across their portfolios. How are they going to make this work? And, a scalable solution is absolutely required. So the way that we work with BREEM, set up the BREEM program is to ensure that using BREEM is an investment in the property. We provide insights on performance and providing a framework for improvement, ultimately to help the asset protect that value and to grow it over the longer term. The certificate is an outcome, but it shouldn't be or can't be the only outcome. So we work with a lot of larger scale REITs that are looking at how do we scale this? How do we make this work? And part of that is making it cost effective. But it's a value issue too. If all you get at the end is a certificate, how is that adding any value other than, a piece of paper? When we work with clients, that's what I say to them. I said, if you get to the end of this process and you say, all I got out of everything that we've just done is this lousy certificate, then we haven't done our jobs.
Interesting and very important. So I have one more question, which is about real estate technology. Buildings are getting more sensors for things like water usage, things like that. Does that then connect to the certification, or how does that all go together?
Yes, but so for us, consumption data is an important part of the measurement, right? And in some cases, like water, just measuring is a good starting point. There's not necessarily a benchmark for it. What does good look like? Because in many places, just measuring water and thinking about it is kind of a new concept. But data quality is really important, and I think we've seen a proliferation of sensors and depth of data, right? We've moved with energy. We've moved from, maybe a daily consumption down to being able to look at 15-minute intervals. And our question always is, how is this adding to the conversation? What is it delivering as an insight that goes in? Data quality is really critical to making the decisions, right? You can end up with a lot of data that if you don't know how to interpret, you don't know what to do with it, it makes no sense to measure it in that way. So there's a lot of questions about, what is the appropriate level of data collection? But also I heard a great analogy, about quality of the data being collected is, the sensor matters, calibration matters, that it's being accurate. And that's something that we also need to look at, too, is that, again, not all data is the same, but absolutely, it's a great way of being able to tap into information. We would say with any asset, if you aren't measuring yet, start with the basics, right? Start with your electricity bills. That's always a good one. Start on that. Start reading your meters on a daily basis. Do the basic groundwork first for data collection, and then start looking into the sensor market. But make sure that it's data that you can actually use for insight. We see a lot of just, data in, pushing out for reporting, but it's not really helping drive the needle forward, right? We need to move towards an outcome, a better outcome. So definitely considering what kind of data matters for your organization and then what you're going to do with it, most importantly.
Excellent. Well, you've given me lots of food for thought today, so thank you so much for your time. And a reminder for listeners, you can learn more at BREEAM.com. That's BREEAM.com. Stay well and stay invested.